and the webinar. And we're live. I can see the numbers going up. Welcome everybody to a new session of Platform Engineers on Tour. I am joining from Spain today. I don't know where everyone else is joining from, but you can post in the chat and let us know. There you go. Somebody in Austin. I love Austin. While we wait for people to roll in, let's just give a couple more minutes. But just in the usual housekeeping rules, everybody. So the session will be recorded, and we'll share it tomorrow per email. So no need to go crazy on taking notes or anything. Simone and Federico will do a session for about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. But if you have any questions throughout, don't be shy. Feel free to just drop them into either the chat that people are using now or the Q&A. You can also use that, and then we can queue them up. And I will do the usual bit of shameless advertisement for PlatformCon. Portugal, nice. I'll put the link here. For those of you who missed it, we launched PlatformCon in the last month or so. The conference will be on the 9th and 10th of June. So if you haven't registered yet, go check it out. And both Federico and Simone will actually host a talk there. So hopefully we can also use this session as a way to give them feedback around the topics that they're going to cover, so that they can refine and fine tune the talks for PlatformCon as well. All right, with that said, I think we're good to go. So Federico and Simone, thank you so much for doing this. Federico and Simone are leading the team at Meltwater, building their Kubernetes-based internal development platform. They know a thing or two about platforms, so I think it's going to be a really interesting sesh. With that, guys, over to you, and I'll shut up and disappear from the screen.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Federico. My name is Simone, and with Federico today, we will talk about how we migrated from the Amazon VPN CNI plugin to Cilium. My name is Simone Sciarrati. I am a team lead at Meltwater, and I am located in Gothenburg, Sweden, just like Federico. Oh, we're in a, there you go. If you haven't heard about Meltwater, we are a software as a service company, and our mission is to help our customers better understand, influence, and engage with their key stakeholders. Here are a list of the services we provide, and if you want to learn more about it, you can go to meltwater.com. Very well. So Meltwater is a global company with engineers all over the globe. We're about more than 300 engineers, and we're organized in autonomous teams. And these teams are responsible end-to-end for their applications. And our team as a platform team provides a few internal services, one of which is Kubernetes. And to give an idea of the scale of our clusters, our main production cluster is used by 70 teams that deployed more than 3,000 applications and some up to more than 12,000 pods. We provide about 10,000 cores, 24 terabytes of memory, and we offer different instance types to accommodate different workloads. So memory intensive, CPU intensive, GPUs, all of that. And of course, just Kubernetes is not enough. So on top of that, we run the usual suspects, add-ons. We have the cluster autoscaler, so we don't have to worry about capacity. We have observability, autoscaling, DNS, all of that. All things that our users rely upon. And we managed our cluster in Amazon, in AWS with KOPS, which is a tool in the Kubernetes project. And when we started with Kubernetes, the Amazon VPC CNI plugin was the only one that supported native routing, and that was our choice. So if that worked, why did we want to change? Generally speaking, we're always interested in looking at new functionalities provided to our users. For example, network policies or better network observability. But specifically in this case, what triggered the work was a requirement to encrypt all the network traffic between the applications running in the cluster. And why Cilium? We have been following Cilium for a long time, and it looked like a great choice for this use case because it promised to enable encryption transparently, so that all traffic would be encrypted without our users having to do any work at all. And another reason is adoption. Cilium has been chosen by many managed Kubernetes providers as the default CNI. And it's also in use in many very large companies. So it looked like gave us some confidence that it was a sound choice. It also has an active community, and it recently joined the CNCF. So we wouldn't be alone if we run into any bump in the road. We also had our requirements. Of course, it needed to be the migration. We wanted it to be absolutely seamless. Our users shouldn't notice anything. Because of the way we manage the cluster with COPS, it needs to be something that we can run in place. We can move all the workloads to another cluster. And we didn't want to have to change our tooling. So we still want to use COPS, and we definitely didn't want to move away from native routing. And we don't want any of the components that our users rely upon to be affected during the migration. And also we want, of course, to be working as usual after. And as last requirement, we don't want to have to upgrade Kubernetes in order to move to the new CNI plugin. So with this list, we started small. We created a small production-like cluster and to learn how to run Cilium in AWS CNI mode. We followed the documentation, which is really good. And so we learned all the multiple configuration options. And once we had something running as intended, we also looked at the very good blog post about benchmarking and the tooling that is provided by Cilium. And we ran our benchmarks against Cilium to compare Cilium and the current CNI plugin, the Amazon VPC CNI plugin, with encryption on and off to see that it would perform just as well. And once we were satisfied with the results that we got, we looked at how we could combine Cilium with COPS, how we could manage one with the other. With the Amazon VPC CNI plugin, was managed through COPS, but we decided to move away from that. We decided to manage Cilium outside of COPS, because this would allow us more flexibility with the configuration options. Not all the configuration options are exposed through COPS. And also we will not be tied to the version of COPS in order to change the version of Cilium. But in order to make this work, we had to push a small change to COPS, and which was merged. So we don't have to maintain our own fork. And once all of this was done and we were ready with COPS, we looked into how the procedure of doing the migration. And now I'll hand over to Federico.
Thank you. Yes, so we have prepared the migration. We learned how to configure Cilium and how to use Cilium, and now it's time to find the way to do the replacement. We got inspired by a blog post where Sky switched over from Flannel and Calico to Cilium, and they were also doing a live migration. And from reading the blog post, we then thought, okay, this should be possible and should be even easier to migrate from the Amazon CNI to Cilium, as both of CNI plugins are using native VPC IPs and doing the native routing. So our main idea was that if one pod lives on one node, that node is then taking care of either CNI, either the Amazon one or the Cilium one. So pod on a node with the Amazon would get the IP from the Amazon CNI, and the pod on a node that is managed by Cilium would get the IP from the Cilium CNI. And both the Amazon CNI and the Cilium CNI would then ask Amazon for these IPs. So there would no be a double assignment of IPs like that. This also allowed us to plan for a multiple day rollout since we had these large workloads there, and from previous upgrades and other migrations, we already knew that this would probably take 2 or 3 days. And being able to run both CNI plugins at the same time also gave us the confidence to be able to do this. So how did we do this in detail? We started with the cluster, and where the nodes and the masters were managed by the Amazon CNI. To have this configuration stay, and anytime we add new nodes, we want them to be able to steer which CNI is managing those. We added a configuration change to the Amazon CNI to only run on certain nodes, and those certain nodes were labeled with the CNI plugin AWS. With this, we ensured that these nodes were taken care of the Amazon CNI plugin. What we then did was to launch the Cilium operator. Since there were no Cilium nodes, it was pending. And once we added the first Cilium node to the cluster, and the Cilium daemon set was configured to not run on any nodes that were configured with the Amazon CNI plugin, we could add new nodes to it. They were then picked up by the Cilium CNI plugin. The Cilium operator launched, and then everything was ready to continue. What we then planned and did was to migrate the master nodes to Cilium as well, so that we knew that the control plane was ready and migrated. And with this, we had the control plane in Cilium, we had the old nodes with the Amazon CNI plugin, and then we had new nodes being picked up by the Cilium plugin. And then that's what we did then. We added new nodes. They were picked up by the Cilium CNI plugin, and then we drained old nodes, and the workloads migrated to the new nodes with the Cilium CNI plugin. This turned out to work flawlessly. The only thing we had to do was to, as I said previously, configure the Amazon CNI plugin to stay on certain nodes, and then configure the Cilium CNI plugin to just run on the nodes that are not taken care of by the Amazon CNI plugin. The migration, when I said we drained nodes, the workloads from the old nodes towards the two new nodes, we used or took advantage of the cluster autoscaler to spin up new nodes as they were needed. We drained an old node, the pods migrated to a new node. If a new node was needed, the cluster autoscaler would spin up a new node, Cilium would run on that node, and then the workload would end up on that node. And to help the cluster autoscaler and make this process a little bit faster, we over-provisioned the cluster with some low priority pods that kept basically empty nodes warm, 2 or 3 per availability zone. And as soon as real workloads migrated to those nodes, the low priority over provisioning pods would then trigger the cluster autoscaler to start a new instance, which would then just become ready after 2 or 3 minutes. And with that, we always had some warm nodes ready, which made the migration even faster. And pods that had to be migrated would not be in a pending state for too long. And once this was done, the end state would have been then a cluster where the control plane is on Cilium and all new nodes are on Cilium. When we reach this, we can then just happily delete the daemon set for the Amazon CNI plugin. We prepared the rollout. We had this procedure. We did not want to do this manually. So we codified the entire procedure, all the commands to spin up, label the nodes, spin up the corresponding daemon sets, patch the old daemon set, do the configuration changes. And with that, we could then run a couple of tests where we would spin up test clusters about the same size as the production clusters, and we then just practice the migration to gain confidence that this will work. At the same time, we also started to inform our users on the cluster that this will happen and how we will migrate from one plugin to the other plugin, to give the users confidence that this will be a seamless procedure that we have aimed for and usually do. Yeah, before we migrated the real important clusters, we dog-fooded the solution on an internal facing production cluster where there is no external customers affected if something should go wrong. This cluster is still quite important as it's used by engineers internally for their day-to-day work. It's a controlled, as I said, there were no external customers being affected by it. It's still a production workload. During that migration, we discovered that we had some small connectivity issues for some ports sometimes. And to discover that, we wrote our own test tooling called Bravo Pinger. What Bravo Pinger does is basically saturates the node with ports on every ENI, on every possible IP, and does some connectivity tests. We had previously used the Cilium connectivity test that they have, which works very nicely. But this here is an edge case on Amazon that we discovered with this, that ports on the secondary ENI, getting an IP from the secondary ENI, could not talk to any external internet address. And in the end, we discovered that we had missed the egress masquerade interface configuration flag. This was on this internal production cluster, which was good. With this, we then discovered that we need to add this flag to our configuration before doing the real migrations. We had this then running for a couple of weeks to see if this is stable and works as intended. And once the time was ready, we then did the migration as planned. We changed the configuration of the Amazon CNI plugin, we added Cilium to it, we drained the old nodes, the workloads moved to the new Cilium nodes. It took 3 days as we had thought it would take. We would start in the morning, we would drain and migrate from old nodes to the new nodes until we called it a day, and then we continued the next day. And then during the nights and evenings, we let the cluster stay in the state it was with both CNI plugins, and that worked without any problems. So with this, we also avoided long days and night shifts. During this migration, we nevertheless encountered 2 small hiccups. That was that the resource request from the daemon sets, or the resource usage from daemon sets on nodes increased slightly, which then prevented some workloads that had really tied or were using almost everything from certain nodes or resources from certain nodes could not start. We talked to the teams, they lowered their resource requests, and then those workloads could also start on those nodes where the daemon sets were using some more of the resources than previously. Another bump that we encountered were instances with lower IP limits. Simone said that we have instance groups with 9 different instance types. Those instance types don't have the same capability with regards to ENIs and IP limits. Still, we wanted to have the same configuration overall, which meant that in the end, to overcome the small road bump, we launched larger instances that had the same IP capabilities and ENI capabilities as the rest of the instance types that we're using. This affected one instance type. We missed this. In the weeks and months of testing, we missed just this instance group that is using GPU instances that they have a lower ENI and IP limits. After that, the 3 days, everything was fine. We had migrated the 400 nodes. Cilium was running okay, and we celebrated and called it a weekend, though it was Thursday. Yeah, everything was working fine. The migration went as we had planned and practiced beforehand. And we went in the weekend, and then when we came back on Monday, some problems started to appear after a couple of these days, 4 days after the migration is finished. We were advised by teams that some of their pods and some of their workloads had intermittent connectivity issues. We started to look into that, and in the beginning, we thought it was DNS. The error messages were contained a lot of the get address info not found error messages, and it's always DNS, isn't it? In this case, it was not DNS. DNS was a symptom, but it was not the problem. Digging further into this, we then thought from the logs and going further into debugging mode, it has to be the Amazon EC2 limits that the Amazon has on bandwidth allowance and contract allowance, that we were exceeding something there. It was visible that some of those counters were past the Amazon limits. In the end, it was not that either. We discovered that some of the issues that we were experiencing, the connectivity issues, disappeared when we restarted Cilium, and they came back after some time. So we were looking then into Cilium, and to debug Cilium, they are the great tools. They have Hubble. They have Cilium system built into the Cilium CLI to collect a lot of information from the nodes, state of the Cilium CNI plugin, but also state of the network configuration that is happening on the nodes itself. And with the Cilium system, we then, after a couple of weeks of testing and debugging issues, and there were let's say the situation was stable. We know how to work with those connectivity issues, but we also started to learn more and more where to look for the problem. And with the Cilium system, in the end, we then discovered a routing misconfiguration where a pod would get two conflicting routes, sending the packets through both network interfaces, even though it would have more than one network interface. This causes problems on Amazon as it would drop the packet. Knowing this, we then started to look into the code, and we actually then, after adding a lot of debugging statements and understanding learning how the flow in the CNI plugin works, we then discovered the part of the code that we think caused our problems. We have so far now prepared a proof of concept to fix this, and are going to submit this back to the Cilium project, and to see if this is something that is a real problem or if we have misunderstood it. But as we see it with this fix that we have provided our problems, we could not reproduce our problems anymore. So I think this is a valuable PR, will be a valuable PR for a future version of Cilium. Yeah, so far we have are still using Cilium. We have not switched back though of the initial problems that we got after the migration. They're stable now. We understood where the problems are, and we're going to provide this back to the community. The journey that we went into migration started with learning Cilium, see how we can use Cilium with our cluster provisioning tools, and then even digging deeper into the Cilium functionality and the code. And with that, we want to thank you for listening. You can reach out to via these addresses to us, and the GitHub Meltwater engineering public presentation repository will contain the PDF of this presentation, and I think also Luca is going to mail this out later today or tomorrow. And with that, we are open for questions.
Indeed, we will follow up. Thank you so much, guys. That was great. Yeah, we actually already have a couple of questions queued up. So let's start with the first one. Richard, was there a reason to pick K8s over any other tool?
I can answer. At the time that we chose we were looking into the tooling, there wasn't really that much. I think we did an evaluation of the different tooling, and K8s was the most actively supported and the one that provided the best user experience from our point of view. And since then, there's been an inflection. At some point, we felt that it wasn't, development of the tool was slowing down, and it wasn't really catching up with new releases of Kubernetes. But since a couple of years, the development is going really, really swiftly, and we're really happy with that.
Yes, we should also add that we started to use COPS early 2018, late 2017, and that was before there was even EKS.
Yeah, good point.
Shira is asking, were there any downsides of migrating to Cilium from AWS VPC CNI? And did you consider chaining the AWS CNI to the Cilium CNI?
Regarding the chaining, we only considered it slightly. We thought of that would add complexity, because at some point you then need to maintain and understand two CNI plugins, even if you just use them for different parts. The Amazon one would still do the IPs, and then the Cilium one would do all the other added on functionality. And we thought that it would be too complex having two of those, and it would also prevent us from using functionality that does not work in chaining mode. And to be honest, we also had encountered a few years ago some problems and bugs in the Amazon CNI plugin. And then we said, if we have to deal with bugs, we only want to deal at some point and in one place.
I think I can add to that too, that the Cilium CNI plugin with the use of the operator has a more efficient way to interact with the Amazon API. And so that was an advantage. If we had gone for chaining, then we wouldn't be able to reap the benefit of it.
Fair enough. All right. We can wait for a couple more minutes for if you guys have any more questions, feel free to drop them in, either the chat or the Q&A. I'm curious, guys, what are you thinking about exploring at the PlatformCon talk on top of what you discussed today? Is there like a specific direction that you want to dive into, or how are you thinking about it?
You mean for our talk, or generally as participants in the?
For your talks.
I would really like to know what's the feedback. Would people know more about more code, more other reasons, other things that you would want to hear? That would be, I think that's the feedback that we're looking for to, in order to drive in a specific direction.
Absolutely. And hopefully people will drop it here in the chat. Otherwise, there's always I always remind people of this. Let me drop it in here. There's the platform engineering Slack channel where we also have this type of follow-up conversation. So feel free to go in there and follow up on this too. I'll pop in the link in here. Sheer is asking, are there any functionalities that were lost when migrating to Cilium?
I don't think so. I can't think of anything.
No.
I think that we get, on top of the basic functionality, we also get better observability of the components itself and better logging. So overall, I cannot actually think of a single downside.
No, we have better metrics as well. So the operator, we have a better interaction with the Amazon API, rather than every node having to talk to the Amazon API and requesting IPs. This is now happening centrally through the operator, which reduces the number of calls and rate limiting issues. We get the same functionality as before. We have native IPs from the VPC. We can control, and also the allocation, the number of IPs that we pre-allocate to a node, and these were basically what we had configured the Amazon CNI with, other than the standard is to reduce pre-allocation of ENIs and IPs. And we can do that with Cilium as well.
Sounds like a successful migration today. So Marco is asking, did you find any other people with the same connectivity issues you've experienced with Cilium?
I would say not exactly the same, but there's been we've been keeping an eye on issues in the Cilium project, and also we engage with in Slack. So if you want to directly interact with us, you can also find us on the Cilium Slack. There's a lot of these issues were very similar, and we try to reach out, but nothing that is exactly the same.
Yep. There's for example, Datadog published a blog post on an issue that caused them some gray hair now last week, and it's similar but not the same, and it's edge cases involving a certain provider, cloud provider, and perhaps also a certain configuration.
All right. Well, so Carolina was asking what more you want to dive into apart from Con. I guess we sort of answered that. But Richard, other than native encryption, were there any other advantages of Cilium over Calico?
I think we looked a bit at the benchmarking, and that looked to be more performant. I don't really know all of the features of Calico, so I can't really talk about that. But yeah, I think benchmarking was that what we saw.
That's the benchmarking, but and then also for us a factor was, as Simone mentioned, the Cilium being a project of the CNCF, which gives you certain guarantees in terms of life cycle for the project.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we did have, by the way, a session with Chris Tompkins. Yeah, Chris Tompkins from Tigera and Calico. So if you guys want to go check it out, I'll make sure to include that link as well in the follow-up email. All right. Looks like Richard makes sense. Sure beats enterprise licensing. Thanks. All right. It looks like we got all the questions in. Unfortunately, not too much feedback for you guys. So hopefully people will share some in the. Thank you, Share. We'll share some in the Slack channel or in an email afterwards. I'll make sure to share it with you as well. But thank you so much, Frederico and Simone. It's great having you both. And yeah, see you apart from Con.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.